Hey guys, welcome to the Game Dev Discussion Podcast. This is episode 44. Before we get stuck into the podcast, for those who don't know, I have recently launched a Patreon. Essentially, this is nothing's going to change with the podcast. The podcast is still going to be weekly. It's still going to be the same quality guests. The difference is a bit of added level of support and interaction from the community. So there's 3 levels to the Patreon. There is a £5 level, which allows you to have input on what the upcoming guests will talk about. You can make suggestions on who you want to see come on the podcast, and I'll actively read them and take them into consideration when scheduling. The second tier, which is £20 a month, is essentially gives you access to a exclusive Q&A for Patreons, so you can submit your questions to our guests, and after recording a normal podcast, I'll do an extra quick episode where we have direct Q&A where you can ask your direct questions and our guests will answer. And then the final tier, which is £50 a month, you get all the previous perks of the other 2 tiers, plus you get 1 hour mentorship sessions with me where I can give you anything you need: career development advice, CV building, environment art, proper art material, portfolio reviews, any of that kind of stuff. I'm only going to plug this once because I normally hate this type of stuff. However, we have got a fantastic guest this week on episode 44. We have Jacob Claussen, 3D artist. How are we doing, bro?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on. I've been I mean, dude, we've sort of weirdly interacted for a while. Like I've always seen the stuff you're posting, been a big fan of all the stuff you're posting. You've always been very supportive of the stuff I'm doing. And it's funny because a guy I've been helping recently, Chris Minelli, he was like, "Oh, actually, I began help from Jacob, and like it turned out we're basically saying the exact same things in our feedback, which is quite interesting. So it turns out great minds think alike."
Yeah, he's been saying the same to me, and I think I don't know. That's a big part of what I like about this community. Just people helping each other and supporting each other.
Don't you always find it weird that we're such a supportive community, yet we're also so hype? Like we're always in competition with each other. Like every artist, every environment artist, every 3D artist is in competition with each other. Yet we're so supportive and we're so willing to share. Don't you find that a little bit odd?
Of course, I think it comes down to a little bit our industry is moving so fast. So, like having advantage with the workflows you have really doesn't really matter that much because you don't know what happened in 3 or 5 years with that workflow. So I think protecting workflow is not that meaningful in our industry, more than just in like the companies. But on a personal level, I think 3D artists, I think we thrive by sharing and seeing how people using our workflows and stuff.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. It's actually like linked into the corporate level or the business level, because you see stuff like with Unreal and Quixel where they're like, okay, let's make everything free and like share it all, and Substance Source, like let's share all this great artwork and make it free. It's like it's crept into the corporate level, and I find that I mean, it's good. It's a fantastic thing. But yes, I just find I always, every time I think about it and I see it and I observe it in Discords and Facebook groups and the general community, I'm always like, this is so bizarre to me when I think of it like purely black and white pragmatically. It's always so odd to me.
Yeah, we've seen it in like in movies and music with like streaming,
Mm.
making it easier and cheaper to make. Like movies in the 70s was kind of impossible to do, but now you just have to have a mobile phone to make a movie. Or music, you can have a recording studio at home. And I think we start seeing that with 3D also, with Blender and all the stuff Epic is doing.
Are you on the Blender hype?
Yeah. I have uninstalled my actually, so I'm completely Blender now.
How long? What was it? How was actually? Let's talk about that. How was the learning curve? Because I came from Max to Blender, and last year, so I had 6 years in Max, and last year, around about the time I went sort of lead with Decagon, I uninstalled Max and was just like, right, I'm only going to use Blender. And I was lucky because I had Michael Kinsley right there to teach me like in real time. How was your convert, like your transition from from Maya to Blender?
I think after done like been through so many softwares, I think you're starting to get kind of comfortable because you know it's going to be awkward. But if you just use it for 1 or 2 weeks, it's starting to click. So I would say it was like 2 weeks, and then it was no problem anymore. Maybe for me it's a little bit different because in Maya we didn't have any what you call them, functions where where you stack stuff, like history in Maya doesn't really exist.
Oh,
So
like non-destructive workflows.
yeah,
Right,
kind
right,
of.
right, right.
So that was cool to see and experience, and that's still something I'm exploring. So for me it was just to pick something, like a small project, and just work from that. Maybe doing a quick tutorial, but usually I tend to prefer to just click around,
Hmm.
personally.
Yeah, you prefer to like explore the software yourself and like find what's useful in your own time. Um, it's been interesting. Speaking about workflows, you're one of these guys. You're one of a rare breed that does both stylized and realism. I know. I mean, I spoke about this quite openly. Like, your King Arthur challenge was one of my favorites. And it's always nice to see like stylized artists and who could do like both realism and vice versa. Um, just out of curiosity, do you find it like almost refreshing? Like, if you do a day of realism and you come home and you do a bit of stylized, it's almost like you're not you're not creatively fatigued. Like, it's completely new, so it's refreshing. Or does that not happen for you?
For me, I think it's super important. I'm quite the generalist. I think it doesn't just come down to the stylized version versus realism. It's more for me. It's in general just trying new stuff always and trying to broaden my perspective. But when it comes to the comes from the stylization, is basically I started out my career working in stylized art because I was in indie and then went over to AAA. So it was reversed before. I did at work, I did stylized, and then when I came home, I did more realism. And now that's kind of switched a little bit because, yeah, like you said, so you don't get fatigued on the stuff you're doing.
What how was it? So let's get into that a little bit. With the indie, like what big changes were there? Like, what was the big things you noticed when you went from an indie studio to a AAA? What was the really noticeable changes, like changes in culture or like work practices? Like, what really stood out to you?
Yeah, so I started with indie like basically through my school, and that the beginning was kind of just didn't know workflows and stuff, so it was a lot of just struggling. But when it became more serious after school, it was a lot about be able to wear different hats, like
Mm-hmm.
because you're so small in the studio, so everyone has to ship in, and I think that's basically the biggest advantage I feel when I came to AAA, that I'm very very versatile when it comes to talking to different branches in development, and I think sometimes that's missed in AAA. Like
Mm-hmm.
if people go directly to AAA, it's kind of like sitting in your 3D group and being very comfortable, and I think people miss out a little bit, not thinking as a game developer, uh, instead thinking more as a 3D artist maybe or something. So
Isn't
just
it? Do
that,
you miss that?
yeah.
Like, did the in indie? I felt like you also had one hand on the steering wheel, sort of. Like your voice. I think in an indie, your voice was really heard, like all the way through the sort of levels. Like, if you said, "Oh, I think we should do this," I feel like at indie, your voice could be heard a bit more, and you have a hand on the steering wheel. Whereas in AAA, because it's so big, um, it's a lot harder to have your say as an artist. Would you agree?
Yeah, of course, but I think it also comes down to the person, what how that person like behave in the studio. So
Mm-hmm.
at my last office, I I got to do a lot of stuff because I was willing to do. So I think sometimes people are comfortable in their seats and like, doesn't like uh, put up their hands when there is a possibility to do more. But yeah, you are closer to the pure creation of the whole thing in indie. But for me, AAA, the fun part is also more going into depth when it comes to like one single thing. So it
Mm.
can be like if you're a prop artist, being very hands on the props and like very focused on that. So for me, I see positive in both sides.
What about you know, what? How to explain this? Do you find when you're at, in it? So this is what the problem I had with indie. It's not sorry, let me phrase that. Not a problem with indie. It's something I faced personally while I was there. Was that because you were having to think of so many things at the same time? You're sort of the amount of choices and decisions you're making, mate. You're pretty fatigued at the end of your day, like because you're just having to think about so much and concentrate on so much that you sort of wore yourself out. Whereas in AAA, I find because you're so focused on something, you have one area to worry about, and that's all you got to worry about, just being really good in that one area. That you sort of everything is a breath of fresh air. You get out, say for example, if I'm doing materials all day, like that's all I'm doing is materials. As soon as I get my hands on a proper home to do myself or an environment, it's like it's sort of it's fresh and new and exciting. Whereas I find in indie, because you're constantly doing everything, by the time you get home, you're kind of like, you just you're mentally just not burnt out, but like you've just had to think a lot more. I feel like, and that might be unfair, but I'm just curious. What do you think about that?
I mean, when I was in India, I kind of experienced the extreme of it. So I kind of learned to not take work home because that I think that was my biggest problem when I did indie. Really, just not taking like the things work wise home and working on them, but also in mind, like
Mm,
thinking about everything because like you are 15 people like our studio and every action matters for the future of us, so it was of course stressful, and I noticed that when I came to AAA that I never felt it was the same pressure, which
mm-hmm.
was kind of nice, but there is pressure from other side there, like you said, feeling like you maybe not have always been listened to and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that because there is so many voices that want to be heard and stuff. So yeah.
What about so what did you actually do to help with that? Because I can say now quite openly, I'm someone who does struggle with you know taking work home or doing like if there's a problem, say for example, like ArtStation, we're considering this particular thing. It's like I finish my day, I close the software, move on to my own stuff, and say I go to watch TV, but in the back of my head, I'm still mulling over this idea uh, of this thing we're trying to develop, and I'm kind of like, what did you do to like counteract that? Because I know it's something that's very difficult. It's something you can't, help doing, but you kind of actively have to. I feel like you have to consciously fight it. So, is there anything you did like which helped you counteract that while you were at indie?
um, I think for me it was a lot of just taking care of me and myself, like with training and eating good and sleep, especially sleep, stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. um, because I did a portfolio at the same time because my end goal after a while was to take me myself to AAA and experience maybe more senior people around me and stuff like that. So I had that back thought always when I came home. So I had to take that stand and start focusing on myself a little bit. And I mean, I'm still living a little bit in that world where I have a hard time shutting off. Like if I don't do 3D, I paint. So watching
Mm-hmm.
movies and stuff for me is also a little bit like I can feel time running away sometimes. But
I'm glad that ain't just me who feel shares that. Dude, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, you feel like you know, you can't. Oh, God, how do you explain this? You can't. It's like you're wasting time. It's like this stuff when you're watching movies or TV, and it's really hard. But like, I have a wife, and she gets very angry at me, because I'm sat. I'll be sat on my PC, and I'll be doing like personal work, and she's like, "Oh, you know, you want to come off and watch TV?" I'm like, "Nah, I don't really want to watch TV. Like, I don't really like it." It's like, "Why?" I don't know. There's more productive things I could be doing. I could be doing materials. I could be doing personal projects. I can be doing podcast stuff. I could be planning stuff. Like, it's very hard to switch off. But you did allude to a point there, which is funny. The more I talk to people, the more I'm starting to see this sort of shared. Um, when you're in an indie studio, and this is something I went through, I felt like a life five. So yeah, our studio, you have. It's quite easy to get to the top of kind of. I don't want to say at the top of ladders, but like it feels like you're the one teaching everybody else, and no one's teaching you. And I know that's what it felt like for me when I was at the past couple of indies I've been at, is that it's very quick to get to the point where, like I said, you're the one teaching everybody. And there's no, because in indies, normally what happens is it's very hard to get, high level senior people. You feel like there's no one really, like that Yoda teaching you. You don't really get that, I feel like. And I know that since joining Decagon, it's been a breath of fresh air because you've got people like Clinton Crumpler, and Taylor and Michael and Duard telling, like, imparting all their experience, and I'm like, yes, this is great. Like, I'm the small fish again, and I love it. Did you find that with indie as well?
yeah, of course, that was the biggest reason for me to starting to look into AAA. I experienced the Dynasty community, and that was one factor of like seeing Jeremy critiquing and stuff, and never feeling that at work really. It was more like running against a wall and learning that way. So for me, it was kind of clear after our game was done that I needed to move to AAA to learn. But I also realized that in the end it comes down to yourself, take like approaching people and talking to people and learning on your own. It's not always like a secret pill to just go to a AAA studio and think that you're gonna learn everything by just sitting and waiting for it. You really need to to find it there also, and also at home, like being in communities that are popping up now, or competing in competitions, or just following, looking at trends and stuff. So I think it's easier, but it still needs to yeah take your own responsibility to find it.
Yeah, it's crazy how much the communities make a big difference. I know I'm the exact same. My big kick up the ass was meeting the Dynasty community, and it's like I've said this a few times, and it's my main comparison of why they're so valuable is when everyone always says when they join their first studio, they've got like a linear curve graph, like, and they're progressing nicely. As soon as they get into a studio, they spike really hard. Like, their learning goes through the roof, and that's because you're surrounded by like-minded people who want to help you, and you're all very good artists, and you're just looking to progress. And for me, I feel like the learning communities such as Dynasty or Experience Points are the closest thing to replicating that studio environment. Um, and having a bunch of people who are all artists trying to help each other, support each other, critiquing each other in a very honest and professional way. It's just such a it's just a massive, like, it's kind of it's almost a feedback loop, and
Mm.
something else I found. I don't know if this is. I'm curious actually if this has happened for you. It's kind of like developing them art circles, close friends who are artists. There's a few guys, which is no secret. People like John, Joe, and Jay, and Kieran, and Rick, and Patrick, all really really close friends, and we talk all the time. We're always sharing each other work, and I can always rely on them to be like that extra level of honesty, to say, in learning communities, there's a certain level of manners. People don't shit talk your work if they're out of politeness. But I can always rely that, if I speak to them guys and I'm like, I'll drop my work in there, they will be as brutally honest as I need them to be. And that's kind of like it's that sort of thing I say to a lot of people. It's like, it's that step further of a learning community. It's like actually developing honest friendships with people, like artists who will give you the hard truths as well as the nice truths. That's something I found recently has been very helpful for me. Going through some of this, like, changing jobs and all this kind of stuff. Having them guys there to, just be my reference point, and I know they're going to be honest, and I know I can trust what they have to say. It's really helped, me make some key decisions and what I'm doing. I'm just curious, have you done something similar? Have you know how to develop that type of thing, or have you been, relying more on community?
I mean, I maybe looked outside the internet a little bit for that, because for me, I think it's also important to get out and stuff. I'm very good at just staying in and crunching art. So my goals has been to try to start communities outside internet also. We have like a drawing circle here in Stockholm and stuff like that, because I'm in a lot into concept art now, so getting my feedback from that. But then of course you have like people you can always throw stuff at, and having it online is perfect, because everyone are not in the like I am to be like in Stockholm, which is like a game dev hub. You can find game devs everywhere here. So I think trying to find those small pockets is also important to really push yourself, and also just building up friendships. So it's not only just communities, it's also friendships.
How's doing concept, like looking into that traditional 2D art? Is it affected your 3D art much, do you think, or is it something completely separate for you?
No, I see it as those two things are merging slowly. You see 2D artists getting closer and closer to 3D. So I think eventually it's going to merge somehow, because workflows are getting easier in 3D. So I see it as just a evolution. And I experienced that stuff has become easier for me to quickly feedback on myself or others when I can just do paint overs and stuff. So I'm quite happy that I picked it up, because first I picked it up more to get like quick fixes with finishing stuff, because 3D, so especially environments, are so slow. It's like a couple of months. And painting, I did like daily paintings for 2 years, one every day, and then you got like the quick fix of finishing something. But then it evolved to starting to train concept art and stuff.
What software is it you use? How do you paint? Is it traditional, or is it do you use Procreate on an iPad? Do you use Photoshop? Do you use Corel Painter? What is it you use?
So I'm Photoshop and then Procreate on my iPad. But
As I say, have you found it? How have you found a Procreate?
I really like it. I usually take that to like my drawing circles and stuff. But sometimes it's nice to just do on Sketchpad also. But I mostly prefer Photoshop. It's still the closest to me. And now I'm dabbling into trying to mix 3D and 2D, so doing paint over stuff like that.
I am starting to use, I have to admit, because I've got a tablet as well, and because I'm doing a lot of more traveling with ArtStation, I'm using basically I'm planning the scene, and I'm like, okay, I want to like develop any ability I have as like an art director. So I'm like, okay, let's actually key shot and let's like storyboard this out. So I've been practicing, like I'm using the Procreate and the tablet to like do my rough key shots, and then taking them into Photoshop and now doing actual refined, thumbnail art. It's kind of like I'm treating like Procreate and a tablet as a notepad and pen, in your little sketchbook or tissue drawings or cigarette pack drawings, as I like to call them. and then I'm treating Photoshop as like, okay, this is where I'm taking it actually into production, and I'm going to do a refined version of what I'm planning. It's not it's interesting. It does tap it for me anyway. It definitely taps into a different part of my brain though. Like it's completely rewarded in a different way. Um, what what was the biggest challenge for you? Was there any like 3D things in your head that um blocked you from doing, you know, the 2D stuff? Like you're just like you're thinking in a 3D mindset too already.
I think it's just beneficial. I've seen 2D artists going into 3D, and how quickly they pick up 3D scares you almost, because I think they both are very close, and I think both are can all help each other. So I did in my indie studio, we did almost no modeling. We mostly did ZBrushing. So I'm coming more from that background when it comes to 3D,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like it's very similar in like thinking shape and creating like volume and stuff to a 3D thing. So I felt quite comfortable. It was more about like learning the fundamentals, and that was my goal with picking up 2D, is really going back and learn fundamentals, not only um, like in a baseline, more like trying to go deeper with it. And like I'm still struggling with it. It's like endless, I think.
You would be one of them guys. I know. I can already see it in like a couple of years. Like there's God, there was a 3D environment artist not long a couple of years ago. I remember, like he was like, you know, principal level environment artist, and then he just switched to being like a principal level concept artist, and it was like, this isn't fair. Like normally, most people are like, you're either 3D or 2D, or like that's you get to be, you could do both, but you get to be really good at one of them. And I can just see it already. Like you're really proficient at 3D, and I can see it be like, okay, I can just at one point I can see being able to just choose a career. Like, okay, what do I want to be today? Do I want to be a concept artist, or want to be an environment artist, or like a 3D artist? Which one do I want to be today? Like, is that the end goal? Like for you, like just to be a really rounded, versatile artist?
Yes, you hit it on the head. It's for me. It's I think it's kind of also the future a little bit. Like people are going to be more of tiny art directors, because I think the kind of the grunt work is going to be based on just smarter workflows, like
Yeah,
procedural workflows and stuff. So I think being a good storyteller or being a good art director when it comes to composition and understanding color and stuff, I think that's going to be more important in the future. So it's a little bit that, but also I like to be able to create my own ideas from yeah, nothing, or from just reference, instead of just because when you start out as a 3D artist, you rely a lot of you look at a cool concept art, and then you model it, and then you after that you feel a little bit like, what did I really do? And
yeah.
I always got that feeling like, was this my art, or was that person art?
Oh yeah,
And
that's
for me it was kind of like I wanted to be able to bring my own ideas to realization.
yeah. I still struggle with that. I know I've mentioned it. I've mentioned it before, but like the Cerberus piece, it was, it still feels uncomfortable to me. Like some of the other ones I don't feel so bad about because I've sort of worked out a composition in my head myself. Um, or I'm using like a photograph, but the Cerberus piece, it was like I've directly referenced and copied a concept, and that was the idea. But then all the comments, man, I'm like, they're all like, "Oh, we love the color palette; it's so nice, and we love the camera angle and the composition." I'm like, "That's not me. I didn't do any of that." And then, yeah, it's a very odd one for me, like, and I don't think I'll probably do it again anytime soon. Stick so religiously to a concept because I definitely get what you mean. Like, you just don't feel like it's yours. And I mean, that's what I'm in the process of doing now. Is planning a scene where like I've just coming up with a concept and the everything from scratch. And even if it doesn't turn out as good as what like a, you know, a ready-made concept one would be, is that kind of like ownership of everything, which is, yeah, it's quite nice. Um, it's actually interesting. You hit on something which Tim Simpson mentioned, which is you can't. proceduralize artistic creativity. You know, like you said, composition, color theory, imagination. Okay, maybe you can. I don't know.
Soon.
And maybe I'm being dull, but like, you know what I mean? Like, it's so hard to turn that into AI or proceduralize it that that's going to be where the value is now, not how quickly how well you can create material because I could just photo scan it, or how quickly you
Mm.
can generate a set of rocks because Houdini can do it now. It's going to be in the creative aspect of it.
Yeah, I just think that there is going to be less people needed to create something big. So I think
Mm-hmm.
like the way of thinking AAA is gonna like having those like 800 people's big studios are gonna be less and less. I like 10 years ago we solved it with having a lot of outsourcing studios and stuff, but I think that's gonna eventually become the procedural stuff. So when you go to a AAA studio nowadays, you don't do that much modeling anymore. Anyways, mostly it's environment artists, and then you have few 3D artists doing hero props. So you already seen that shift a little bit, and I think that's going to just be more when UV mapping disappears, or just pulling polygons, making assets. Because I think in the end, telling the story should be, or for me, is the fun part. Um, and coming back to that with mimicking concept, I don't believe it's wrong, because I think it's very good to do it in the beginning. You see it in 2D artists do it with master studies. I think it's a good way to learn, and I did it a lot, like analyze other pieces or other games to really try to come up with why does this look good, and asking you that question, and trying to analyze a lot, I think. But but do
I
you
came in from a slightly different way though. I don't think of it like that. I was thinking of
okay?
it as you're in a triple A. So this is how this, right or wrong. This is how I saw it. It was like you in a AAA studio, you have a creative director or an art director who sits down with a concept artist for say 6 months, and they're trying to really come up with a concept for the game. Your job as an environment artist is to capture that concept, to capture the mood and the like evocative emotion of the scene. And the way I saw it, I was like, okay, I've already done a bunch of scenes which were like just my sort of brain mashes.
Mm,
It's like, okay, let's show that aspect that I can stick to a concept and capture the mood of a concept. I don't know. I saw it more. I suppose it's more practical. I suppose like it was. Let's show a particular skill set that is used in a game studio, which was like I said, copying a concept and showing you I can do that as rather than a. I know what you mean with the master studies, which concept artists do. To understand, it's like understanding the fundamental of why they're the masterpieces. Um, yeah, this one was more like, oh, let's just show I have that practical skill as opposed to like a master study. You know what I mean?
yeah, totally. And I mean, I like you, when I learn a new software, I usually just pick a concept and model from it and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a very good like way to learn something. And I mean, it's important to also think that you're not always going to be relying on a concept. Sometimes if you're lucky and you do something super important, you get a concept, but sometimes it
Mm-hmm.
just can be just some painted blobs on 3D assets, and they say go ahead, do something about this, and
Yeah,
you have to rely on your own skills, like your designing skills and stuff. So I think it's important for people to understand when you come to a studio that it's not always going to be concepts and stuff, because you see a lot of students and stuff being very inspired by concept and always working from concept. But I think it can be good sometimes to, if you do it, kind of trying to get something else, something of your own also into it and stuff like that. And yeah, trying to analyzing why the picture works and stuff. So it's not always only like just um, copying.
yeah, I know what you mean because there's also a so Randall Mackie, he's a independent artist. I work with him at Art Station. He and I can't remember the artist's name, and he'll shoot me for this because he's been lecturing. I basically don't know names very well.
Mm.
And it's like, oh, have you heard of this guy? He's like a legendary concept artist. I'm like, no. And he's like, what? How have you? What? This is a no. You must have. And he showed me the work, and I'm like, oh, that guy. Yeah, I've seen his work. So he showed me this concept art book, and it's basically these legend level concept artists come together, and it's this thing about like concept artists aren't artists, they're designers.
Mm.
Um, and basically, the whole point of it was they show like all the little crappy scribbles and sketches while they're trying to work out silhouettes and composition and all this kind of stuff. And that was like, and they basically their point was that is the meat and bones of our job. The pretty picture at the end is like the last 10%. Like that's not our job. Our job is this, and it's the sort of engineering a shape and engineering a picture and trial and error and trying all these different things. And ever since he said that to me, the whole like we're not concept artists and not artists, they're designers.
Mm.
It's just really stuck with me because he showed me the pages of the book and seeing all the scribbles and the way they were thinking, and you could actually see them thinking in real time. But it was pictures, and it was so interesting. And I was like, okay, yeah, this is now. It just changed my perspective of concept art altogether. Like even the pretty picture at the end, it's gone through 15 iterations of design and trial and error before they get to that point. So you almost, I trust the image more now when I see production concept art. 'Cause I'm like, I already know that it's gone through that iteration. That it's like this is the best it can be. Like compositionally or shape wise, it just validated it for me. Is that when you're researching concept art, you're getting into it? Is that the sort of stuff you're looking at? The more design aspect, or you're looking more just the artistic creation aspect?
So that's basically the thing I love with concept art. And when I started, I did like one painting a day for 2 years, and then it was more about just learning to paint. And after 2 years, it was kind of boring looking at a face and just rehashing it. You become kind of like just a copy machine. It's very good for just learning the skill, but now I feel like I really want to come into the design aspect and become a problem solver, because that's what I see a concept artist as, like solving problems in production. So usually, like you said, it's not about so much about doing nice renders. That's more for the public to see. And then
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to in a production, when a designer wants to get rid of a wall and we have too many staircases, so the hole needs to be something else than just a path to a stair. A concept artist gives some ideas of that if it's broken by explosion or some other way. So it comes down to that, and I think I mean some environment artists can do that on their own, and sometimes it's not needed, but in general that's what you get, like in a production when it comes to concept, more quick problem solving, and then you need to take it to the fidelity of 3D.
It is an interesting idea, and now I think about it, is the more you know we talk about it, the more I'm like, yeah, maybe it is a really good thing for artists, like 3D artists as well, just to be able to concept up like a prop. You know what I mean? Like to be able to, you know, rather than have to 3D model it to get to the point of because so this is an issue I had like early on in my career. I got tunnel vision really hard. Like I had to see the idea through to the end before I could realize it was a bad idea. I had to see it be wrong with my own eyes, and I suppose if when I think about it, concept artists sort of do that in real time. They hash out ideas and get to the end point of it being wrong. Um, and I feel like it's almost a skill which is worth doing. Not even just to be a 2D artist, like just that mindset of getting to the end point quickly.
Mm.
Seeing your shape, your idea come alive quickly, and then being able to write it off as a bad idea. I think that's quite a it's an interesting thing.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to paint to be able to like be a concept artist. You have 3D concept artists nowadays. So I think if you don't feel like you like to paint, but be able to kind of understand what makes like a good silhouette or what makes a good composition is kind of important, I think, later in your career. In the beginning, I think comes down to a lot of just learning to navigate in the softwares and understanding the restrictions of game engines and stuff like that. But then I think I mean, I've seen a lot of seniors being kind of unfulfilled, and when I talk to them, I realize it's a little bit like they've done the same thing for so long. So I think that for them, it's very important to step out from the comfort zone of just being a 3D artist. Sometimes be a problem solver. Sometimes.
Yeah, it's weird. It took a while for me to get to this stage. I sort of realized that like artist is like, although I am an artist and that's kind of what I hang my hat on, I enjoy a lot of different aspects of it, like of business of life within games. I like the managerial side of stuff. I like the business side of things. I like the because it's kind of like we touched on earlier on. It's like stylized and realism, like it's a breath of fresh air. And my last job where I was pretty much a a gameplay designer, artist, and like client business person all in one because it's an indie studio. Like I could come home and do art all day, all evening because I was like it was completely fresh for me because all day I've been doing business stuff. So when I get home, it's like I can do art and it's fine. And I imagine that's probably somewhere where like that stretched over the course of a few years for seniors is probably where that comes from. Is like doing art all day. They never have that come home and do something fresh.
Mm.
Especially AAA because like you know yourself, the lifespans of like AAA development are very long. So it's like it's 3 years, 4 years, 5 years on the same thing.
And suddenly your
And
things can be destroyed. I think that's a aspect also for a lot of people.
yeah,
Being super invested in something and then it gets cut. So I think that's something I learned very quickly to not think about too much and really using your free time to have that passion that nobody can destroy. It's like your darling, and you can do whatever you want with it. Because that I've seen a lot also.
that being said, do you find it difficult then? So with that, obviously your personal stuff is your stuff, which no one can destroy. Does it ever affect the way you receive critique on personal projects? Like you said, your professional stuff is like you kind of have to detach yourself from you because you can't get precious over it for obvious reasons. Do you find because you sort of treat your personal stuff as okay, this is my stuff, this is my, like I said, my darlings? Does it affect the way you perceive and receive critique, or not really?
Not really, I would say. I believe so much in feedback, and I think you need to seek it. It's super important, not only from people but from yourself also. Like coming back to the analyzation thing and being good at analyzing other people's feedback, because people are saying a lot of stuff and they don't have the context that you have on your piece. So you need to kind of sort out the feedback and then apply it to what you want to be the end goal. I think you learn that after a while, like getting through feedback and stuff. I think some
Okay.
people think it's very hard with feedback. Um,
Mm.
I think it's a good skill to have, especially when you come to AAA, because you're gonna get feedback there, and you need to change stuff and be prepared for that.
I was trying to. Every time I do university talks, I've been doing a lot recently, and it's one thing I do say, which I'm like, although I didn't go to university, I'm almost envious of, and I think is forgotten about by students. And I'm like, you are surrounded by like-minded peers. Discuss ideas. Get used to discussing ideas openly because that's what you do when you critique. Like,
Mm.
I was explaining, someone, Kieran Goodson said it ages ago, and like I've sort of took it around with it, which was, you know, asking why. And he explained it brilliantly. He was like, you know, not asking why in a petulant, dismissive way. It's asking, like, understanding why you're receiving the critique you received. Like, if your lead says to you, "Oh yeah, the silhouette feels wrong. It's not doing X, Y, Z." Like, ask what, like, understanding why it's not right. And once you understand why it's not right, you don't then repeat the same problem. And I was explaining to to the students, I'm like, you know, you guys need to get used to talking openly, because when you get to studio, your work's going to get critiqued and you're going to have open discussions about your work. And you're at a moment in a place where you get to openly discuss amongst your peers what you're doing, why you're doing it. And, you know, I understand at that age it's easy to want to sit in your peer groups, you know, your friends, your 4 or 5 friends at university or college, and you only speak to each other. But I was like, you need to get used to speaking to the people who you wouldn't normally speak to, because when it comes to a job, you don't get a choice in the matter. You're being paid to be there. You're paid to have these colleagues. So you got to get used to speaking to people you wouldn't normally speak to. And it's such a skill. It's a skill which is so like undervalued. I mean, that's why I spent my whole ArtStation learning course talking about soft skills, because I feel like students and like younger artists getting into the industry focus so heavily on the hard skills, learning software, learning pipelines. They forget to develop as people sometimes.
Totally.
And it's my biggest frustration. Like, you know, when I've dealt with postgrads at studios, I'm like, I mean, don't get me wrong, they're amazingly talented, but quite often they lack just the professional courtesy or the ability to communicate professionally and reasonably. And you still have to spend their whole probation period like just trying to teach them these skills.
I mean,
Go on.
I've seen it myself when I've been teaching, like start teaching in schools or school now, and you see, it's very focused on creating the substance ball and stuff, and forgetting that in the end, game development is like a team effort.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's not only trying to seek feedback from your peers when it comes to 3D art, also connecting with designers, especially if you're an environment artist, it's very important. Or other parts like concept art, trying to meet them somewhere, because you see, sometimes in studios it can create like islands of different positions, and they don't really understand what the other part wants. So I think it's very good to try to meet them and try to understand them, because in the end everyone wants to create a good game. And if you are in university and have like those projects, try to not only think about your hard skill, try to appreciate doing a group effort, because that's going to be your work later in career.
Okay, so I as we've been going for roughly an hour now, we I asked this everyone. I always throw the curveball at all, man. I think you're going to give quite an interesting answer to this one. You know, in a year's time, where do you want to be as an artist, as a person, as an artist? What do you look to develop over the next year?
I mean, I've been always trying to set goals, both weekly, monthly, but yearly. So for this year, it's a lot of just getting into Blender, like getting comfortable with Blender, but then also taking this whole idea of be able to art direct myself, or I'll also think about design and stuff. So making a smaller game, and maybe being in a ArtStation challenge with concept art is kind of the two big things I want to do now, to really test myself, basically.
Oh, dude. Okay, not to put you under pressure or anything. That'd be so sick to do your own ArtStation challenge concept and then do the 3D environment for your. Oh my word, dude, that would be fucking epic.
Yeah, it's
That,
kind of
no
my
pressure.
idea.
No pressure. Not not put it on you, but that deserves to win in itself, because that would just be so cool. But Jacob, I'm afraid we got to wrap up, dude. It's been an absolute pleasure talking. I've been wanting to talk to you for a while. It's been like trying to organize getting you on, because, you know, like I said, we've been sort of interacting passively quite a lot over the past year. across the different platforms. So it's good to finally talk to you properly.
Yeah, likewise.
Like I always say to everyone, thank you for taking the time to come speak to us. Just so everyone knows who's listening, the podcast is available on Spotify, SoundCloud, Google Cast, all the usual places, YouTube. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we have the Patreon. All the support is appreciated, and any support that comes through the Patreon all gets funneled back into making the podcast better. So remember to share, like, subscribe the podcast, because the further we spread the message, the more people get to listen to the fantastic stuff people like Jacob have to say. But Jacob,
Yep.
thank you so much, man. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.